Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Thank you.
I'm supposed to.
This panel is 26, called Wang's Universe, a Roundtable Discussion.
Yeah.
I am so excited to bring your attention to the thinking of Wang Dongye. He is an independent scholar, free from any political organizations or any academic institute. The author devoted himself more than 20 years on this book, in which he lays out a single narrative of the universe story. Just like big historians, Wang says human nature is the expression of all beings, and a human being is the miniature of the universe. But unlike big historians, he tells a story as one of a slow decline rather than an increase in progress. The implications of a narrative of decline are very different from one of progress. So this will give you much to think about. I was introduced to Wang by C.K. Tan. At that time, we thought Wang's work was not available in any language other than Mandarin. C.K. found transcripts of old videos in Mandarin, and he used Google Translate to get them to me. Then we found the book, the big book, on Amazon. Came out in 2020. A Unified Theory of Evolution, Natural, Mental, and Social. It was very slow going, getting through this book. So CK and I worked our way through it every week. Then we reached out to the translator. He goes by a pseudonym, and we had no idea anything about him. And he refused to Zoom with us. He's very shy. But we found a video that we could write English subtitles to. And that is what we're going to show you first. So we are very pleased to premiere this original and radically different version of Big History here along with Hiro. So run the video.
人类文明史就是信息量不断增大的一个进程。任何一个前引问题，只有随着信息量的增大，它才能舒展开来。那么我们下面把20世纪自然科学的总图谱拉开，形成一个大信息量的全新宇宙观。我们看一看这个宇宙物演是一个怎样的进程。上个世纪自然科学的发展，使得原有各学科之间的界限被打破。比如，什么叫生命？关于生命的定义，人类从来找不见。著名生物学家赫胥黎曾经有人问他什么叫生命，他说不上来，只好开玩笑说生命就是逃避死亡。那么直到上个世纪中叶，人类才突然明白，所谓生命其实不过是一个分子编码而已，由此创立一个新学科，叫分子生物学。这门学科的出现，打掉了生物学和分子化学之间的界限。与此同时，甚至在此之前，还发生了一个新学科，叫物理化学。因为我们通常所说的化学键，其实不过是原子物理外壳层电子云能量的重新分布。因此你要想知道分子结构是什么，你必须首先知道原子结构是什么。由此出现物理化学，它又打掉了化学和物理学之间的界限，于是万物展现为一系演化的格局。1859年，达尔文发表了他的著名生物学专著《物种起源》，进化论由此发生。那么在达尔文的著作中，你能看到生物38亿年的进化史，从原始单细胞生物一直到人类，由简单到复杂，由低级到高级。可是随后人们就发现，这个进化现象不仅限于生物界，生物进化之前还有分子进化，也就是从无机小分子进化出有机大分子， 再进化出生物高分子，包括生物编码分子。到此还不终止，人们接着发现，在分子进化之前，还有原子进化。一张化学元素表，就是从第一号元素氢逐步演化出92种天然元素。到此还不结束，人们接着发现，原子进化之前还有粒子进化，就是从137亿年前的那个能量基点，突然爆发出最初的3种基本粒子，这就是夸克、氢子和玻色子。由此演化出随后大量的其他粒子和92种天然元素。那么万物演化这个图谱就全面拉开，构成万物一系、万物同质、完全相等的这么一个局面。那么在这个大图谱上，我们会发现一个很奇怪的现象，就是越原始越低级的物质存在形态或者物种，它的存在度越高；越进化越发展的物质存在形态或者物种，它的存在度反而越低。我在这里得注解一下什么叫存在度。存在度高有3项硬指标：第一，它在宇宙空间上的质量分布越大；第二，它在宇宙中存在的时效越长；第三，它的存在状态越稳定。我下面举例子。基本粒子在宇宙中已经发生137亿年，它迄今仍然是宇宙中质量最大的物质存在形式。既往物理学认为宇宙中的物质总量就是恒星系，可是很快发现不对，因为按照恒星系的质量计算，不能维系现在宇宙星系结构。据计算，要维系这样一个引力结构，总质量至少需要现在的5倍左右，由此推出暗物质的概念。由于近代天文物理学发现宇宙各星系是快速的远离，这就是所谓的红移现象。那么按照宇宙中既有的能量，这种快速远离的能级不够，因此又推出暗能量的概念。尽管物理学现在说不清什么叫暗物质和暗能量，但大多数物理学家认为，所谓暗物质和暗能量一定是潜藏在基本粒子存态中的某种观察不到的能量或质量，而暗物质和暗能量根据计算占宇宙总质量的95%，恒星系只占5%。基本粒子是最早的物质原始形态，可它在宇宙中质量最大，存在的时间最长，137亿年不发生变化，状态最稳定。我们再看原子，所谓恒星就是原子存态，氢核不断聚变，聚变为氦核，释放能量，这就是太阳能。那么一张化学元素周期表，你仔细看，它就是从第一号元素氢逐步演化出92种天然元素。而且你会发现，越原始越前卫的元素，它在宇宙中的总质量越大，状态越稳定；越后卫的元素，它在宇宙中的总质量越小，状态越不稳定。比如铀元素，人类利用它做原子弹，就是借用它的不稳定性。因此恒星氢和氦，仅是氢就占据一般恒星的79%左右的质量，另外19%左右是氦核，其余90种天然元素，或者在一般小质量恒星中数十种元素，占量不到1%至3%。我们会发现，越原始越低级的元素质量越大。而且看恒星系，以太阳系为例，太阳占据太阳系总质量的99.86%。如果我们把行星视为分子物质，那么8大行星加上星际物质只占太阳系总质量的0.14%。而且我们会发现， 行星虽然迟太阳而发生，却一定先太阳而灭亡。当代天文学研究认为，40到50亿年后，太阳将变成红巨星，它的体积会膨胀，把金木水火土大量近日行星吞灭在太阳之中，在高温高压之下，使其分子物质重新解离为原子。也就是说，我们会发现恒星先行星而发生，却迟行星而灭亡。它要从红巨星变成白矮星，变成黑矮星，历经上千亿年以上时间才会消失。可是分子状态的行星迟发而早亡，它再度体现越高级越复杂的物质存在形态，总质量越低，总存在时效越短，存在度越低。到了生物阶段，这个现象更明显了。生命物质仅仅覆盖在地球表面，铺成薄薄一层，它连地球总质量的1/1000都不到，质量进一步大幅度递减。而且我们会发现，越原始越低级的物种存在力度越强，存在质量越大。我给大家举例子，地球上最原始的生物就是发生在38亿年前的单细胞生物。单细胞生物它的生命力极为强大，它从来几乎可以说没有生老之死这个现象。大家想，今天存在的单细胞细菌，它是什么？它是38亿年前那个1分为2的细菌的继续。除非资源限定，它的分裂数量被限定，但是没有老死这个说法，所以生死状态平衡，反倒是越高级的物种生死轮回紧迫。而且它存在了38亿年，从来没有灭绝过。不但没有灭绝过，它迄今仍然是地球上质量最大、生命力度最强的物种。它在海洋中叫单细胞藻类。如果它的总质量不是大于所有海洋生物质量之总和若干倍以上，那么海洋生物的基础食物链早就崩溃了，海洋生物早就系统性消失了。它在地表上叫单细胞菌类，它也是质量最大的物种，因为连土壤的形成都要有细菌的参与。它的生命力度强到什么程度？它在火山口90度摄氏度以上高温的液体中生存，它在深海下10000米高压下生存。大家知道人类潜水，你潜到30米以下你就出高压病了。它在废矿业的强酸强碱液体中照样生存。我们今天污染太湖、污染滇池的那个单细胞生物叫蓝绿藻，也叫蓝藻，它就是38亿年前最原始的单细胞生物之一种。可见原始单细胞生物生命力度之强大。我下面不一项一项讲比如海绵生物、软体生物、扁形生物、节肢生物等等我们直接看中等高度的脊椎爬行动物恐龙。恐龙在地球上只发生了1.6亿年，却在6500万年前突然灭绝了。我们今天讲恐龙灭绝，说是小行星撞击地球导致恐龙瞬间灭绝这就是著名的灾变说。可是这个说法有一个问题，因为生物学家研究发现，恐龙的灭绝至少经历了上百万年。它早在小行星撞击地球以前，由于植食性恐龙，它的食料蕨类植物灭绝，被被子植物所取代也就是所谓花朵消灭了恐龙。植食性恐龙灭绝，以植食性恐龙为基础食物链的肉食性恐龙相继灭绝。 因此恐龙的灭绝早在小行星撞击之前上百万年就开始逐步发生。而且就算是小行星在6500万年前撞击地球，最终导致恐龙骤然全部灭绝，有一个问题不能回答，就是为什么比恐龙低级的大量物种不灭绝？好，我们再看高等生物，哺乳动物。要知道我们人类就是哺乳动物中的一纲。哺乳动物在这个地球上发生，种类只有7000万年到9000万年，却在人类还没有问世以前，绝大多数早就已经灭绝了。它的存在度极低，种群量也极小。我们再往下看，哺乳动物中最高的一类叫灵长目，灵长目里最高的一族叫直立人，直立人才在地球上存在了300万年到500万年，7万年前到25000年前骤然间全部灭绝了。而我们今天的人类，现代智人，在地球上只存在了不到20万年，我看离灭绝也不远了。我们拉大尺度会发现一个情况，就是越低级越原始的物质存在形态或者物种，它的存在效价或者存在度反而越高。越进化越高级的物质存在形态或者物种，它的存在效价或存在度反而越低。我们还发现一个更奇怪的现象，就是存在度越低的物质形态或者物种，它的属性和能力反而越强。我为什么把能力叫属性？是因为所谓生物能力，比如人类的感知能力，其实不过是物理原始感应属性的增益产物。我下面举例子，存在度最高的基本粒子，它的属性能力极低，只有强弱作用力。到原子出现电磁感应，到分子出现布朗运动，到单细胞，细胞膜上布满受体，它居然能够分辨宇宙中绝大多数原子和粒子。到扁形动物出现视觉，到脊缩动物出现五官和神经网，到灵长目动物出现高级神经中枢和大脑皮层，到人类出现额叶新皮层，出现理性能力。也就是我们会发现，存在度越高的物质存在形态或者物种，它的属性和能力反而越低；存在度越低的物质存在形态或者物种，它的属性和能力反而越强越大。请大家注意，它跟我们的直观感官完全相反。我们认为能力越强，存在状态越具备优势，错了。拉大尺度看，能力越强，存在度越低，两者呈反比函数关系，严格到几乎可以计算的程度。大家一定要明白，我们只有拉大尺度才能看清事态。我举个例子，人类古代视野极小，他看大地是一个平板，于是形成盖天说、天圆地方说。因为大地是一个拖在神龟背上的平板，天空像一个穹隆一样扣在地上。古希腊毕达哥拉斯一直到柏拉图，他们观察发现月亮盈亏和月食实际上是地球弧形影子投在月球上的一个表现。他们站在了远高于地球的大尺度上，建立了地球说和后来的地心说。尺度再进一步拉大，迄今这个尺度已经大到时空尺度为137亿光年，也就是光每秒钟30万公里，走137亿年。如此之大的空间尺度，是我们今天人类的视野和尺度。于是我们形成了今天的宇宙观。而且大家还要注意，现象和本质总是相反的。你拿眼睛看，太阳分明从东边升起，从西边落下，明明是太阳绕着地球转， 可事实上却是地球绕着太阳转。因此当我拉大尺度的时候，我们会发现跟我们常识上所建立的观念和物质形态全然不同。我们会发现在物演进化的过程中，物质的存在度是一路递减的，而物质的属性和能力代偿是反比例递增的。我把这种现象叫递弱代偿原理，或者我把这个现象的逻辑整顿模型叫递弱代偿法则。这个看法或者这个事实，这个法则在人类文明史上继续贯彻。比如人类前文明状态旧石器时代持续上百万年，农业文明1万年左右，工商业文明迄今也不过就300多年，今天已经被信息文明所覆盖。我们可以料定信息文明绝不会超过100年就一定被一个更恶劣的文明浪潮所覆盖。我们会发现越高级的结构一定越不稳定，它在人类文明史上继续表达。这个反常的能力和属性越增益，存在效价标志其越低下的状态，很可能才是宇宙物演的总状态。我们今天人类拼命地提高自己的能力，认为自己会由此获得永生，由此获得生存优势，提出更高、更快、更强。你想干什么？你前面只有一个目标，快速奔赴死灭。这才是在大尺度上展现的物演进程。这个学说有效地解释为什么我们人类文明程度越高，反而危机越深重这个重大问题。大家知道，直到上个世纪60年代以后，人类才发现我们今天的高度文明给我们带来了一系列重大灾难。我给大家举例子，大家先看环境污染。我们人类今天已经把地球上最丰富的3大物质空气、淡水、土壤全部污染了。由于空气污染，一旦降雨，空气中的污染物质会随雨降到土壤中，再加上由于我们早就已经把地球上淡水资源的97.85%全部污染，也就是所有江河湖海被污染，大概现在只剩下深山老林里的溪流还没有被污染。农民灌溉只能用污染水灌溉，导致土壤全面污染。早在近10年前，全球土壤学家普遍调研，发现地球所有现在庄稼田地的土壤污染率高达60%以上。污染究竟会给我们带来怎样的损害，我们现在说不清楚。但是你要知道，你今天吃的每一口饭，吃的每一口水果，甚至你今天抽的烟，甚至你每呼吸一口空气，你都被污染所损害。上个世纪50年代，荷兰医学界发现荷兰男子精子数大量下降。这个消息传到英国，英国医学界开始做普查，调出1950年英国各大医院男子精子检测报告与2000年各大医院男子精子检测报告做对照研究。结果发现50年间，英国男子正常精子数下降45%。这个信息传到中国，中国医学科学院在中国局部大医院展开调研，调出1975年男子精子检测报告和2010年男子精子检测报告做对照研究。结果发现35年间，中国男子正常精子数下降30%。要知道，所有哺乳动物它灭亡前的第一指征就是雄性精子数下降。我们再看生态破坏。据联合国野生生物基金会调研，现在每小时 3到6个物种灭绝，每天大约75个物种灭绝，每年3万到6万个物种灭绝，被生物学界称作地球上第6次生物大灭绝，而且灭绝速度极高，比前5次的速度快得多。要知道，现在正在灭绝的物种都是比我们人类低级得多，也就是存在度高得多的物种，连它们都在快速灭绝，我们人类离灭绝还有多远？我们再看气候异常。2009年在丹麦哥本哈根召开气候大会，世界各国首脑都要参加。为什么？今天地球上气候异常的程度已经严重威胁全人类的生存。大会上讨论主题是什么？2度问题，2摄氏度。什么意思？从1788年第一次产业革命到今天不到250年间，我们人类居然把地球平均温度抬高了将近1摄氏度。要知道，地球上的气温本来就是波动的，可是它的自然波动周期极长，几十万年乃至几百万年才发生一个波动周期，而且总的波动方向是制冷，形成冰河期。可是人类在工业化以后，迄今短短数百年，居然快速把地球平均气温抬高了0.8到0.9度，其速率是自然地球气候波动的成千倍以上。为什么大会讨论2度问题？是因为如果人类把地球气温平均气温抬高2摄氏度以上，那么存在于西伯利亚冻土下和北极浅海下的一种物质，叫固态甲烷，也就是我们通常所说的可燃冰，就会从固态释放为气态进入大气圈，而甲烷的温室效应是二氧化碳的20到25倍以上。换句话说，如果人类把地球平均气温抬高2摄氏度以上，那么固态甲烷这个定时炸弹就会爆炸，人类从此就没有解决气候异常问题的任何可能了。可是有学者计算，根据人类现在工业化发展速度要知道南美洲、非洲、阿拉伯各国工业化才刚刚开始，按照这个速度继续发展，只需要30年，大约在2050年前后，甚至2050年以前，地球平均气温将升高2度以上。又有学者计算，如果要打断这个进程，至少需要现在把人类所有的工厂及其工业产品，包括汽车、飞机，关停70%以上。请大家想想，这可能吗？要知道，哥本哈根气候大会仅为达成一个减排协议都以失败而告终。最近达成了一个巴黎协议，美国还退出了，玩不转。因此我们基本上可以断言，人类已经失去了解决气候异常的前途。我们再看大规模毁灭性武器。早在上个世纪末叶，联合国计算，全世界当时的核武器存量相当于全世界几十亿人口每个人屁股底下坐了2.5吨 TNT 的核当量，足以把全人类炸翻几十遍。就这我还没有算更恶毒的基因武器、生化武器、气象武器等等等等。请大家注意，我们今天高度文明了，我们人类却处在全面危机的深渊之侧。人类远古时代生存非常艰难，但作为一个物种，它总体上是安全的。我们今天高度发展、高度进步的结果，却是面临灭绝之险。所以大家一定要注意，我们今天人类根本对自己的生存形势毫无了解，我们的宇宙观、世界观可能发生了重大问题。要知道，今天的学界、知识界，不管是东方还是西方，几乎没有任何学术人员对这个问题进行讨论。东西方所有学者都在主张更快的发展， 都在推动更快的进步。我们究竟往什么地方去？我们拼命地赶着车往前跑，却没有人说清楚我们的目标是什么，我们究竟要到哪里去？如此大信息量的程度时代，全人类思想界却处在遮蔽状态。我们反观老子，他居然在2600年前就已经对这个问题敲响警钟。大家注意，老子的道论是什么？我前面讲弱者道之用，我说它的深解释，弱化现象是道的实现方式。大家注意，它核心点落脚点叫柔弱。大家再想，老子的德论是什么？无为，不要提升你的能力。也就是老子的道论和德论恰好钉在了地弱和代偿这2个点上，可谓慧眼独具，是整个人类思想史上唯一一个最早对这种自然现象有所猜测的思想者。所以老子，我说他目光深远而别致。
我的《物演通论》这部哲学著作对应于老子的道论和德论，揭示了地弱代偿法则，把宇宙万物、人类精神和人类社会的进化发展连成一系。它涵盖了从137亿年前到今天的人类的大历史。在更大的尺度上，我们可以清楚地看到人类正在走向何方，以及我们可以做什么来加以改善。谢谢。
All right, so that was this first English translation of a video of Wang Dongye's theory. And what mind-blowing for me, and every time I see it, it is. But what I want to do now is we've got 2 guests, and TK was the one who introduced me to this. So he created a film about his response to Wang's theory, and then we'll have Zora Chen and her colleague Michael Chow in a video as well. So TK was trained in Malaysia, in Malaysian law, but chose not to become an attorney and instead pursued a master's degree in European studies in Germany. Now he is a civil servant in Malaysia's Ministry of Education and serves as the Southeast Asian coordinator for the Asian Big History Association. Let's watch his video.
Hi, everyone. This is my backyard. You can see there are banana trees, many trees, papaya trees, and coconut trees. It's a tropical region. This backyard is where my children playing now, because Malaysia now is under lockdown, so we can't go out to the park to play. So so they have to play in my backyard. But I have time to record these presentations because they are now taking a nap. So before I make my presentation on how this meditation related meditation is related to Wang Dongye's idea, weakening compensations, let me show you a video.
Different species shared resources, scientists would be forced back to the drawing board with their understanding of how trees have evolved. And this idea is what got researcher Suzanne Simard excited. In one of her early experiments, she looked at nutrient exchange between Douglas fir trees and paper birch trees, 2 different species that grow together in forests and sometimes compete for space and light. She planted fir, birch, and cedar seedlings in a trio. She labeled the paper birch with the radioactive isotope carbon-14, and labeled the Douglas fir with the stable isotope carbon-13. That way she could tell not only if carbon was moving from birch to fir, but could tell if it was moving from fir to birch. The cedar plants acted as a control. Cedar can't form mycorrhizal networks with the fir or birch for the simple reason that it forms arbuscular mycorrhiza, not ectomycorrhiza like the other two. If cedar roots acquire any of the labeled sugars created by fir or birch, it would mean that they had leaked through the soil, not through the fungal network. She then covered the fir with a shade tent, reducing the amount they were able to photosynthesize. If the two trees were linked in a mycorrhizal network, cooperating with one another, then the surplus of photosynthetic sugars from the birch should flow into the roots of the fir. And what she found was that the birch and fir trees indeed share resources. In fact, the more shade the fir was covered by, the more carbon-14 it received from the birch, and the cedar did not receive either of the isotopes. Further experiments showed that these two species are also able to share nitrogen, and share resources in both directions depending on the season and conditions. The two species exist in an alternate feedback system, helping each other when the other needs it, allowing them both to remain healthy. But it's not only a matter of sharing resources. Other experiments have looked at the chemicals trees produce to signal that they're being damaged by voracious insects, pathogens, or human activity. One experiment looked at tomato plants, all linked up through an arbuscular mycorrhizal network. When the researchers infested some of the plants with leaf-chewing caterpillars, healthy neighbors had activated 4 defense-related genes within 6 hours. In other words, they knew trouble was coming and they were preparing for it. As it turns out, this preparation helped them. The plants that had time to produce defensive enzymes against the pest fared better, and the caterpillars munching on those second plants didn't grow as large. And there's also evidence that trees of the same species have some form of kin recognition through their fungal networks. They can identify which trees are most closely related to them and direct more resources towards those trees. These experiments show us that trees aren't solitary individuals, but live in a cooperative harmony with one another. But if they're so cooperative, does this...
Okay, just show you for only 3 minutes of this video. You see, why I relate these trees in meditations to Wang Dongye's idea. First, as you know, Professor Hirofumi Katayama has explained to you about the Wang Dongye's idea for awakening compensations. You can see that meditation is very relevant, because I find that a picture of meditations is the best icon to symbolize Wang's idea of awakening compensation. According to Wang, the nature of independency or self-sufficiency, like subatomic particles, like these atoms and primitive single-celled organism, is stronger or less weak than the nature of interdependency or differentiations, like multi-celled organism, animals, and even human society. So they are stronger. They are stronger than us. Even trees are stronger than us in that sense. They are also more stable and long-lasting. Okay. However, it doesn't mean that there are no connections between subatomic particles. They are stable. They look like they are individualistic. They don't really care about each other on the surface. But they are actually care deeply. Just like trees care deeply. With each other under the roots. But just that they do not depend on each other to survive. This is just like a meditator, who is on the surface, just care about herself, like she is very selfish, by just focusing or observing herself. But actually, the meditators are quietly doing the same thing. I mean, meditations without noisily pursuing active interactions or exchanges with each other. That is on the surface. This is also the trees who are on the surface, which is growing individually without active interactions or exchanges with each other, but deep in their roots, they are quietly connecting with each other through a network of roots. Therefore, trees are also another good symbol for Wang Dongye's idea. Of course, as you know, the symbol of today's International Bay Tree Conference is also trees. So I think this is a very good symbols for even Wang Dongye's idea. So I think that's it. If there are any questions on my reflection of Wang Dongye's idea, especially as a Buddhist, our practice in meditations, how I relate to it, then yeah, maybe we can discuss later. Okay, see you later. Bye.
Okay, thank you, CK, for that video. All right, now we'll watch one more video and then we will discuss all of this because I think it's going to be very fruitful. So Zora Chen and Michael Chow have created a combined video with Zora describing how Wang's philosophy fits into classical philosophy, and Michael will discuss the impact of Wang's ideas on his business management. So these are two very different perspectives on reflecting on Wang's philosophy. Michael is an entrepreneur in Shanghai. He did his undergraduate degree in sciences at Sichuan University in Qingdao, followed by an MBA in Liverpool John Moores University in England. He is the founder of several business software companies for small and mid-sized enterprises in China. Zora Chen did her undergraduate degree in economics and arts, followed by a master's degree in the social sciences. The education path in Shanghai and Hong Kong cultivated her insights for cultural study, communication, economics, and management. More importantly, Zora has always been passionate about literature, art, and philosophy. She takes great interest in translating and composing poetry, prose, reviewing and analyzing philosophical works, and nature. All right, so let's show this video and then we'll chat.
I have always held a belief in my heart to seek the truth. But as I made my exploration of Western philosophy, I became more aware that this voyage does not lead to a single point, but rather a variety of directions. For instance, Immanuel Kant founded transcendental idealism, a belief that all of us possess an inherent structure of mind and innate laws of thought before encountering empirical reality. Through space and time, which are mere forms of human intuition, and 12 categories that we have in common, human beings can reach a consensus of experience as the level of recognition. For example, no two people would argue over whether a tree is a tree. While Kant's philosophy is devoted to the very foundation of natural science, it also indicates that science is merely a product of our transcendental idealism combined with our experience. This was indeed Kant's great discovery. It is clear that he is fully aware that perception is not a vacuum-like pore, which causes epistemological limitation, indicating that we cannot access the thing in itself. This is why Kant created another world to locate the thing in itself.
Kant's transcendental theory addresses relatively lower level of human cognition. However, things become different regarding human activities and the social situation. I have been working in implementation of accounting and business applications. Introducing business applications to organizations entail re-engineering business process and reshaping the forms of working people are used to. Consequently, project teams are brought into a challenging course of organizational change, driven by software implementation. From my experiences in such projects, I see a very distinct pattern occurring in which human beings interpret the situation in which they find themselves in different ways. In one ERP implementation project, for instance, the internal control procedures put in place by German management were perceived by the Chinese sales team as unnecessary barriers and distractions to keep them from focusing on their sales targets and maximizing their performance. My education in philosophy and systems thinking inspired me to build on these observations. Soft Systems Methodology, SSM, provides enlightening elaboration on how active individuals view data on their social experience via a particular mental framework, leading to different versions of the perceived world. I personally call these different worlds. The upside of different worlds is that it is the source of human variety and creativity. However, the downside is that it leads to conflicts among people. When we observe people running into problematic social engagement, we tend to feel that involved parties have contradictory viewpoints looking at the situation, or have bad intentions to manipulate the relationship. Actually, it is the different words problem that causes people to attribute different meanings to a situation, which eventually leads to perceived conflicts or even malicious intentions. When a group of people are involved in a problematic situation, normally they will have to think about or talk about their activities in very different perspectives. So actually, soft systems methodology can be used by the group of people to surface and examine their different perspectives, their different assumptions and mental models. And later, they can work together to build systemic mental models to structure constructive debates. Eventually, they can achieve better understanding of the situation and they can work together to improve the situation.
So what's the success rate of this?
Very good question. Actually, very mixed. In some projects, I observed improved level of project outcomes and client satisfaction, but in others, irreconcilable culture differences, politic factors, and staff skills led to various degrees of project failure. While it is true SSM can effectively address intersubjective issues, it is not able to resolve a range of issues impressed with an increasing amount of information and diversity.
The thing itself that Kant introduced is a delimiting a border for metaphysics. Later, Hegel, Fichte, and many other philosophers devoted themselves to it, trying to find a way out for the thing in itself. Such effort continued until Ludwig Wittgenstein appeared, giving rise to a major upheaval in the philosophy community. In his Tractatus Logico Philosophicus, Wittgenstein defined language, the only descriptive tool, as the totality of propositions. In his perspective, language can present the intuitive facts corresponding to the truth function of the proposition to make a precise picture of the world. The Tractatus, with almost flawless mathematical expressions, describes how logos has sharp boundaries. We can only think what we can think, but we cannot think what we cannot think. This indicates that we can only use the rational mind to describe the facts of what we perceive, but we can never use it to describe itself. To put it in another way, an eye can never see its own eyeball, because what we describe is the same thing as what we use to describe it. Wittgenstein ended Tractatus with the words, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." Wittgenstein thus draws a sharp line between language and metaphysics. In view of this, philosophy seems to be locked into a dilemma. Without knowing the prescriptive nature of perception, the truth of being can never be figured out. Meanwhile, since the perceiving subject itself is also a being, there is no way to ascertain the prescriptive nature of perception without knowing what being is. This resulted in the closure of metaphysics. Having come this far, thinkers seem to have drifted farther and farther away from the exploration of fundamental nature. Is this the real end of metaphysics? We are left with so many questions unanswered. What is the root of Kant's transcendental idealism? How come people are so similar at the level of elementary cognition and so different when it comes to issues such as those addressed in subsystem methodology? And why is the former so stable while the latter is so transient and elusive? Wang Dongyue's weakening and compensation theory completely overturned my way of seeking truth. Instead of getting trapped in the binary relationship between the perceiving subjects and the perceived objects, Wang opened up the origins of evolutionary embryology, leading to a new vertical perspective. He adopted a holistic methodology, taking all beings as a whole, tracing back to the very beginning of all things, which he called the matrix. This logic limit is similar as the singularity of the Big Bang that created the universe, but in a different sense in philosophy. According to the second law of thermodynamics, the energy decays by itself, while the matter seems to be the opposite in our common sense, showing the trend of negentropy. This seems to be a contradiction, given that matters and energy are interchangeable according to the theory of relativity. However, Wang's weakening and compensation model provides rigorous reasoning, arguing that the unidirectional increase of entropy also applies to the matters, which means that all things are decaying starting from the matrix. The matrix decays on its own and had to propagate and propagate and propagate more and more things through 13.7 billion years, which also is how all things are generated. This simple yet informative model clearly explains the internal law of how physical and chemical substances, living beings, human society, and everything else evolved. It is strikingly consistent and coherent with laws displayed in areas of physics, chemistry, molecular biology, neurophysiology, history of human thought, and civilization. Okay, so here let me show you Wang's weakening and compensation model. And here this is the existence threshold. Everything at this line can maintain being as we see, and everything wants to be complete to reach this line. And let me first show you the location of matrix. It is here. It is not absolutely stable at this point, but just a little bit unstable. So it will propagate, propagate, and propagate. It will first propagate time and space as a compensation to maintain the completeness. Actually, it doesn't want to compensate. Because it wants to be complete, it wants to reach this line, it has to compensate, and because it decays. And as time goes on, it decays like this, or this, or whatever. Because the general line would be like this, it decays. And as the time goes on, it will decay more and more attributes as a compensation of the being. So let's call this part the potency of being. And this part, the potency of compensation. As we add these two parts together, we will get the total amount, which will reach this existence threshold maximum line. So we will see that every being can be the being as we see. So we can also call this the degree of being, and here the degree of compensation too.
So where are we now?
Here, actually. The end here. With the minimum degree of being, our human beings. Specifically, during the evolutionary progress of propagation, all things have to develop their attributes of sensing that they must have to couple with the things they depend on to compensate their incompleteness. In other words, to survive. From the most primitive state of matter to the highest living creature, each sensing attribute is prescribed by the degree of being, and this prescribed sensing attribute also prescribes how it uses its structure to gain information from others. This, in turn, realizes coupling and interdependence. Therefore, what the world is completely depends on the different coupling ways of various species from bats to cats to whales to human. Every coupling moment means inevitable distortion and falsity. Therefore, coupling equates to subjective arbitrariness. In the Tractatus, Wittgenstein announced that the world is the totality of facts and not things. However, as we understand what arbitrariness is, why arbitrariness is necessary, and how different ways of arbitrariness forge all the things under the least action principle, we will realize that the totality of facts is in fact the totality of subjective arbitrariness. Both for protons coupled with electrons, or human beings, including their sensing attributes, perception attributes, recognition attributes, and reasoning attributes, coupled layer upon layer with all things, the coupling process is entirely subjective arbitrariness, forming the totality of what we perceive. This seems to be true. After all, there is no color in the world, just light at different wavelengths. Being able to sense light doesn't mean being able to sense the truth of light. Our colorful world is nothing more than a particular distorted way of sensing the things we depend on to maintain our being. In this distorted way, human beings are able to effectively establish the recognition system needed for their own survival. And only in such a distorted way can all the living beings maintain their weak beings with the least cost according to the least action principle. At the moment when I comprehended all this, the world suddenly appeared completely different to me. Everything is nothing but subjective arbitrariness. Closing my eyes, I could sense the breeze with my skin. It is arbitrariness. Opening my eyes, I could see the camera, table, or their arbitrariness. Time and space, included in our transcendental idealism in Kant's philosophy, is arbitrariness. The law of identity, A equals to A, is the law of arbitrariness. As for the simplest calculation of 1 + 1 = 2, it is the subjective arbitrariness that teaches us what 1 means. Therefore, the seemingly impeccable mathematical formula frequently used by Wittgenstein is subjective arbitrariness too.
Kant's transcendental theory governs the operations of lower layers of human cognition. At this level, transcendental intuition organizes the sensational data to form objects we are dependent on. Such recognition response is actually the sensor's arbitrariness, and by the simplest way of operation, the dependent object is presented to the sensing subject. This is the rule that both lower or higher vertebrates follow. On this recognition level, the arbitrary way that we adopt to couple with dependent objects is prescribed by a somehow fixed way of perception. Just like Kant's transcendental idealism, it is this direct coupling that allows our perception results to be basically and stably consistent among ourselves. However, since the human degree of being is being weakened, the volume of dependent objects or sensing objects they are faced with is much larger than the lower animals. Facing an increasing number of sensible objects, humans have to develop a higher level of cognition, namely reasoning, which offers stronger compensation, but is less stable. Through reasoning, humans are able to abstract objects into concepts and perform preparatory reorganization and operation in their heads. enabling them to make appropriate and adequate responses to the dependent conditions. When we do this, we are no longer making arbitrariness in the same way we do at the recognition level. Instead, we are making arbitrariness based on the arbitrary product produced by our recognition. This means that reasoning is once again subjective arbitrariness of the subjective arbitrariness of our cognition. Therefore, while reasoning offers people a way to process the enormous volume of objects and amount of information that we depend on, it also opens up a huge uncertain space for the difference in their ways of arbitrariness due to differences among people's innate endowment and acquired experiences. Such different ways of arbitrariness explain why people interpret their situation and act so differently when it comes to human social activities. Now, accordingly, I can easily find the position of soft systems methodology in one's weakening and compensation theory. In fact, SSM is a specific tool developed to confront the increasing volume of objects people are depending on as a compensation for human instability in reasoning under more and more complicated circumstances of social activities.
Why do we need subjective arbitrariness?
To confirm our being,
Why do we have to do this?
because of the instability of our being.
What if we don't have subjective arbitrariness?
Then we know nothing.
What if we know absolutely nothing?
Then we cannot be.
If you understand Wang's weakening and compensation theory, I think you might already grasp the situation we are faced with. The continuous weakening of the degree of being in all beings as a whole. Everything we do and every compensation generated are only temporarily effective ways of coupling to maintain our being. Just take a look at our present world. Humans are just consistently inventing new solutions which only solve the problem temporarily, but in fact cause larger problems. And this stimulates them to invent more. Then again, restarting the circle until we have nothing more to compensate. Sometimes, the world is not like what you see or imagine. And there is an answer out there in the weakening and compensation theory for you to read.
All right, so I think I will start by asking each of you a clarifying question for me in terms of what your video was saying. CK, how does the underground forest metaphor relate to Wang's theory? Are you saying that when we're meditating, we are the trees above, or we are the underground potency of being, or something?
Okay.
And there's an echo. Somebody can turn off an echo.
Okay. Okay. You still hear echo?
No, it's gone.
It's gone. Okay. All right. Okay. When I start to record the video, I'm thinking, how to explain, because I think it's better to answer questions. But just to answer your questions, when you meditate, it's just like a subatomic atom, for example. let's say the proton and the electron, they are individually separate. You don't see much interaction, but for a physicist, they understand there is an induction, there is something going on, but you know to go deeper into it. And then with that assistance is the strongest, according to Wang Dongye's idea. So I'm trying to use meditation as a symbol, or even a tree as a symbol, to explain that kind of inductions, that kind of sense response, that kind of, it is continuous. And then the more you need that kind of induction, the more you need that kind of interdependence, or you need that more senses, the more you are not stable. So, yeah, I don't know whether, yeah, I'm trying to express that through meditations, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so, in the video of Wang's talk, he was talking about that we are, what is it, the rush to perish, by humanity at this stage, being at the very end of this weakening thing, is rushing to compensate. And that seems to be not the recommended path, and that meditation would be more of Lao Tse and following the Tao. Is that correct?
I think there are two different things. When I do not know Wang Dongye, I never met him, but I'm just watch his videos. So from his, I think his talks, I think he differentiate, Buddhism and Taoism are different. The Tao is different. Okay, so my individual practice of meditation. I find that meditations is the closest to express myself, Wang Dongye's weakening conversation. Because for a non-meditator, a person who never meditate or never experienced the meditation itself, they will say that meditators are so selfish. They just sit there, or they just stand there, they just walk there, observe themselves. So that make us cannot appreciate subatomic particles are stronger than us, while they don't seem to have many abilities on the surface, but actually they are underneath. They are very powerful. Just like the video, the tree to show us. Above the ground, you see the trees are separately. They don't care about each other, but underneath there are a lot of things happening. Sorry, my kids are making some noise. Okay, the thing.
Okay, all right. Thank you, and folks can jump in and raise hands, but I see, so Zora, I wanted to ask you, why do things invent, according to Wang, attributes rather than just decay? That's the part of this that I don't understand. The desire to compensate, where does that come from, or what is that? You'll have to unmute. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think that is a kind of science model. It's like a finite range where contains all the beings in that finite existence range. And as the left extreme of the very left of this finite range, the very left, it is the matrix where it's with the highest degree of being, and then at the very right of the extreme, it is the lowest degree of being. And because everything wants to reach the existence threshold, all the beings, whatever they are, whatever their attributes is, they are defined as a substance, in this model, and they are all in this model. So Wang Dongyue actually take all beings as a whole and put all beings in this finite existence range. And so in his model, he said that the matrix has the highest degree of existence, and it doesn't exist. It's just an abstraction of the logic limit. And it's not the singularity, but it is similar with the singularity, because the singularity is what created the whole universe. And this logic limit is what created all beings. You know, the whole universe doesn't mean the whole beings, but the whole beings is like the all beings in that are generated in our logic. So it's just a logic model. And in this logic model, he regulates the highest degree being and the lowest degree of being. And through organizing the information, the huge amount of information, and he assumed that the highest being is he argued that the highest being is the matrix, is the logic limit with the highest being. And actually, in our entire universe, about 99 or more than 99% of the substances are of very high degree of being. And whatever they change, the beings are just like it just stays like here. Whatever it dies or it appears, it is just moving under this in this infinite range of existence. So he indicates the logic model, and then he said that because the matrix is not absolutely stable at the left extreme, so it needs to compensate. If it's stable, it's absolutely stable, it will not propagate, it will not compensate. So it must compensate. It's because it's unstable. The instability allows it to compensate. And when it propagation means compensation. It's the same. I want to clarify. So it's incomplete and it propagates, and then it will propagate more and more attributes, and then actually it is relatively stable, but there is something that is a very small portion which is not stable, and it became more and more unstable, and it compensates more and more. It's very interesting. It's like at the right extreme of the universe. Actually, it is just a very small portion. All the living beings is just living beings. It's just what is just a very, very thin, like a very thin surface on the earth. So it is just a very small portion of that is compensate itself, and it is the human beings. Yes, like because there is no beings that can be more complicated with stronger compensation, with stronger attributes than other beings. So human is the most is the strongest, with the strongest attributes, which means it must has the lowest living beings, because the beings stays the same. It is the whole being stays the same as in the finite range of existence. I think I should write a dissertation about it, because it's a bit hard to explain. I also want to create something like animation.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, I think big historians, recognize all of the data points in Wang's lecture are all familiar to us. But what he does, instead of an arc of increasing complexity, which is what we say in big history, he says, it's a weakening, and then there's this what we call complexity is the compensation, and the compensation has to get more and more complex. And so to me, I'm fascinated that we have, this alternative kind of a reciprocal of the typical big history, but we now are becoming, Asian infused. So this is, we have these two narratives. I wanted to get to some of the questions. Vandana, you say that blue whales have been around for 34 million years. They have complex brains, languages, and social structures. How do they fit in Wang Dongye's philosophy? Could it have anything to do with maintaining relationships with beings of higher potency? So I think I could maybe try to answer that. You can help me, Zora, if I stray. But so whales, being a mammal, are pretty weak by Wang's classification, because they've been around for a long time, but not when you compare them to stars and planets and hydrogen atoms and even subatomic particles. So they're a weak being, and they compensate with that, with their complex brains, with their languages, with their social structures. And then there's a coupling piece that, ecosystems couple together and make the world better for everybody. And I suspect that the relationships that you're talking about, the social structures, that's my take on that question. Would anyone else like to tackle it?
Actually, Wang does not want to specify any specific types of animal, any specific types of living beings or beings. He classified those animals into a larger classification, and it's like the blue mammals. Yes, Lucy was very right about that. The blue whales is just belongs to the mammals, and it's like the human being is, but the human beings has stronger attributes than the blue whales. So the human being's degree of being is lower than the blue whales, but it doesn't mean that all the things that is stronger than blue whales can live longer or something, because the degree of being is not only measured by how the age of what time that the blue whales can exist or any other animals. It doesn't measure in that way. It is measures like the quantity, the length of being, and the quantity or the quality of the being. It's all measured. So it has four index to measure the degree of being, and you could read the book to find out. So for example, the bacteria or the virus, they just live in a very short time, and they die quickly because it has very simple structure, and it cannot live so long with its simple structure. But there are so many viruses, and it cannot extinct. It just propagates more and more, and it seems like that it can never extinct. It has the stronger degree of being. Yes, it does not measure in a way that how long that the animal exists.
Okay, and then Vandana goes on to say that an inevitability about human extinction. If so, what about the role of culture and paradigm? Does Lao Tse offer a way out? Does this explain the longer-term survivability of indigenous cultures? And again, I'll take the first crack at that. I think actually Dongye said that bacteria are much more potent than we are. they essentially don't die; they just reproduce. They just, so in that sense, I would say that indigenous cultures are more. Modern humanity is weaker than indigenous cultures because we're more vulnerable. We are compensating with our technologies and our grocery stores and all these things to live, whereas indigenous cultures have more robustness. That's my answer to that. And therefore, gaining the wisdom from indigenous cultures strikes me as a very important thing to do. It is interesting about the inevitability of human extinction. And so, Wang makes the case very strongly that we all know that we're all facing. And so what I'm interested in teasing out with people is how do the implications of Wang Dongye's theory help us? So I don't know the answer to that, but Zora or CK, do either one of you want to tackle that?
Just want to address the question of indigenous cultures. I remember during our Lucy and I, we have this every week discussion. I give you an example of Scout. Remember Scout? There's one uniform organization.
Oh, the Boy Scouts.
Boy Scout, actually, for children. Yeah. Why did they have Boy Scout? If those people know the history. Because I can't remember the First World War or Second World War. It's during the war, there are many children who their parents will die already. So the children will live in city. They don't know how to cope. They do not know how to what. So they had to run to the forest to avoid the bombardment. Or whatever. So they could not survive. They don't know how to cope. They don't know how to. You see, it's so fragile. It's so fragile. People who live in the city, we do not know how to survive in the forest. So you compare to indigenous people, if there is a war, they run to the forest, they can survive. So you see, we think that we have a lot of capability, a lot of attribute. We can use internet, we can use electricity. We can see once this thing is very fragile, once this complexity is destroyed, you just cannot live. Your being are so in the minimum, just like Zola said, it's minimal. Just anything happen, finish. But indigenous people, they can survive in the forest. There's an example I try to, in a very simple layman terms. I'm not academic, so I cannot express myself, but I try to express that way. Okay, thank you.
So here's a saying from Jos. In the Netherlands, we have a saying, when you are not strong, you must be very smart. Is this the essence of Mr. Wall? And I think, we're all decaying. The universe is decaying since the Big Bang. So we need these attributes. It looks like, yes. Okay. So, and then I wanted to go into the chats. I thought there was a question there. Robert asks, what relevance of Wang Dongye's unified theory of evolution for our future? What's the relevance? That's for you, Zora.
Oh, okay. What's the relevance of,
the future.
Yes, there is lots of relevance. And actually, I think it is a good reminder for us human beings, because I think now the whole world is like they are trying to improve themselves. They are trying to invent more and more things. They are trying to improve the technology, improve everything. And at the same time, they are creating troubles, like they are causing the pollutions, the environment pollutions, or the lots of, because they are competing, because I want to add it to the last question. It's like the competitive environment is not advantageous to our future, because everyone wants to be the best, but at the same time they are consuming the things, and they are consuming other things, and the other things is actually limited. So at the same time, they are compensate, and everyone wants to compensate, and they also can cause conflict between each other. And if we live like the ant society or the bee society, then the society would be much more stable than the human society. But now the humans are like everyone wants to pursue the individuality. Everyone wants to pursue the freedom, the equality, and at the same time, they want to be the strongest. Everyone wants to be the strongest. And actually that prevents us, that actually accelerates our speed of extinction. Actually, I'm not saying good or bad or right or wrong at this stage. I am just telling you what this model is trying to convey. It's the natural principle. It's like the regulated principle that is hidden behind our representation world. It is like this is like a principle. It's not about good or bad or what kind of thing can be better. It's not about good or bad. It's just the natural evolution of how the things would go, and everything is like destined. You cannot, your human effort is just very weak, and you cannot just create something huge to change something or just reverse the evolution. You can never do that. But the model tells us that we can actually lower down our pace, lower down our speed. Do not try to develop so fast. And actually, it's just accelerates the speed of extinction. Yes.
I wonder if we've got any of the singularity people and the people that are talking about the future, if AI is weaker or stronger than us. So I could argue that both ways. If there's anybody out and there in the audience who wants to surmise that. Let's see what else we've got here. I think, what time do we break? Is it 1 or 1:30? Let's see, any other? Okay, so I've got all of those questions. Okay, here's a question from Ajasya. In terms of complex adaptive systems, human beings are in a supercritical state. My question is, if they were, and when were they in a subcritical stage in their evolutionary journey? That is, at a much higher subsisting degree? That's a great question. Zora, I'm going to give that to you.
If they were in a...
When were we, as complex adaptive system, when were we the strongest, the more potent?
When? Oh,
we are now.
Yeah.
Might be.
Yes, actually, in the beginning of our human existence.
Okay, hunter-gatherers then.
Yeah, in the beginning of our human journey, or actually we are one type of modern human. I don't know how can I call it in English, but actually we have other types of human which has already extincted, but they have lived for lots of years without civilization, without the technology, without any inventions, and those so-called humans lived for a very long time. Actually, the Western world develops in a very different way than the Chinese world. It's like the Western world there are so many philosophers, so many scientists. The science actually is originated from the philosophy, and the scientist tries to keep asking the question of what the world is composed of, and like Aristotle, Plato, what the world is composed of, and they kept asking, and then the science was created, and so everyone started. And actually, at the beginning, their cultural environment is like trading with each other. It's also because of the geographical factors. They are used to trading with each other, and that develops their individuality and their way of thinking, their habit of thinking, and keep asking the root of the essence of the question. So they become very logical and very rational, and they always try to find the answers to the question. But in China, the situation is completely different. It is because in China, although the land are huge, but there are very little area that can be farmed and that can grow food. And so people needs to cooperate with each other to grow more food and to eat, so that they can survive. So in this way, they paid more attention to the relationship between people. They tend to be more harmonious, so they can grow food together, and they can grow more food instead of trading like the world, like the Western world. So in this situation, their relationship is like very harmonious, and everyone is like stay foolish, like they just listen to their family, and they grow food. It's very simple. They lived in a very simple way, and that is why the science was never developed in China. So actually, if you understand Wang's weakening and compensation theory, you would understand that actually such way in China, it has the higher degree of being than the Western world. Actually, the Western world tries to ask the question, and that is good. That I don't want to talk about good or bad, actually, but I want to say that actually such continuous asking of the question and continuous exploration, it just is what science was generated, and what high technology was generated, and why everything, and then people has to compensate more and more, and while they have more and more attributes, they need to depend on more and more things. It's like that in very past, like in the ancient times, if there is some kind of fire in the forest, it's just a very little accident. But now, if there is a fire, and that is a very huge accident to us. Why? It is because we are depending on more and more things with the development of technology. Yes.
Okay.
So, did I answer this question? I think I have.
I think, yeah. I think we've got some more questions here. So let's see. My ability to screen them just went away. Why is that? Something's wrong. I can't, you guys in the back need to help me. I can't see questions. I think somebody asked CK a question about meditating. Was that a way of slowing down? Yeah. Yeah. Can you see the question, CK?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, this is very difficult unless you are also a meditator.
I think
so. Okay. Just
Vedanti
imagine. Let's say
be.
we go to physics. Just imagine the electron is one meditator, proton is one meditator. So there is some relation. If you know physics, there's some induction between them. And that gives me an idea that meditators are doing the same thing. Because a meditator, they know when they observe themselves, they can find, they concentrate, they focus, they can find certain your desire or your try to wonders. You know, you try to wander here, wander there. You see, that's why you can see all the senses are so complex that our imagination and form the imagination which always haunt us. But when you meditate, you have to train your mind in order to bring all these senses into one. Just like the subatomic particles, you know, like you know, between in the atom there is a proton and electron. That kind of induction. That's why I like the idea of using meditation to symbolize Wang Dongye's awakening compensation. Because if you read his book, you especially at the volume 2, I may come to this mental state. You explain a lot about this, you know, how we evolve from the sense response, the induction part, atoms in the proton, electron, and then slowly evolve into more this what I call it, understanding and also reasoning, you know, senses and that kind of things that make it very complex and make it very confused, or just like what Zora said, you know, arbitrariness, subjective arbitrariness. So we are in that stage, very confused. We are very confused being. Sorry to say that because I am also that kind of being, but I mean, meditation, you will find it out as a Buddhist. Of course, if you don't meditate, you won't understand my answer. Sorry. Thank you.
And then we have, let's see, Robert mentioned Yuval Harari's Homo Deus, Brief History of Tomorrow. And people wanted, because that's a good description of the future. So, so Harari's view is that, according to Robert, war becomes obsolete, famine is disappearing, death is just a technical question, our future holds immense possibilities. So that's a really uplifting notion of where we're going. And I don't know how that, Robert, you want to jump on and talk? Do you think that that contradicts the fact that the weakening, that we're going to continue to weaken, or is war becoming obsolete an example of weakening? I'm not sure. And yeah, so.
Yes. Yes, of course, there are future, there are lots of possibilities, and the weakening and compensation model doesn't really predict when the human will be extinct. It doesn't predict that. It wants to tell us that everything, it is actually the magnificence of the model just amazed me. Actually, it didn't wants to predict anything. It is just want to show something, that we are the being that with the least degree of being. And of course, future has immense possibilities, but according to the weakening and compensation model, because even the feminine will be disappearing, or the world is absolute, or the medical technology will be so strong, that will be so good, that will make people live longer. But actually, there will be other problems. There will be other problems that you cannot imagine. Yes, and actually, all kinds of science fictions or books, they can predict anything. But actually, why they can predict? Wang tells you why you have such self-consciousness to predict other things, or why this, what is this self-consciousness come from? What the evolution of the self-consciousness, and from the simplest matters to the most complicated matters. So it tells you the whole vertical evolution routine. So it tells you that why it has the lowest degree of being. And this is just a model, a scientific, a logical model. It's not a scientific model because there is no numbers. There is no precise numbers that can be input into this model, but it is a logical model. And it doesn't predict, but tells you why you are at the lowest degree of being.
And that resonates with the fact that the more complex something is, the more fragile it is.
Yes.
So, bacteria can live in the Arctic and in boiling hot springs, and we have a much narrower temperature range. And so that's why I'm curious about what computers would be. If we are making computers, are they more complex or are they weaker than us? Because it seems like they can endure cold and hot, and I don't know, we're going to send them out into space.
Yeah, because if you treat computer as a single object, you will see that the computer is very strong. It can help us. But actually, I can just list some examples. If human works, if the human are replaced by the computer, if the computer can do everything for us, so what is our employment rate? People cannot be employed, and the people cannot earn money, and the economy gonna be shut down. And also, the computer also is developed to deal with the high increasing amount of information that is generated every day. And as the time goes on, the information would be increased to more and more, and it will increase at a speed which is much faster than the present even. And so we needed to develop the computer. Of course, we need to develop the computer to deal with this information. It is just like what is mentioned in the video. And at first, we just have the hard system thinking to deal with the model, and but as time goes by, we found the hard system thinking model is becomes invalid. It is because of the generation of more and more information. So we need to invent the soft system thinking to deal with this increasing amount of information. And the computer is the same way. It would be invented to deal with the high degree increasing amount of information, but at the same time, it will consume lots of electricity. It will need to consume lots of energy to operate it, to run it. And this is at the same time, it consumes the other things in the environment. Actually, the environment is also within the all beings. So that is why Wang can contain everything in the all beings, and our being is not absolute being. Our being is just a relative being because we need to depend on other things, and we does not come from nowhere, but we comes from our lower some matters that is lower than us.
Yeah, you're right about the energy consumption required for computers. So it seems like Robert has his hand up. I can't communicate with my people in the back. If he's still doing that, by all means, let him in. And somebody asked, Adyasa asked, if we stopped growing as an infant, would we be stronger? I think, that's a developmental stage, but it's a great question. Here's Robert.
Okay, thank you very much. Just 3-4 days back, I was in a hospital and there was a CT scan, which is a
Can you hear?
Which is a CT scan.
Maybe I have to change.
Yeah. We have a computer magnified many more times, and usually a table computer is one that is a miniature computer, and the CT scan is a whole scan. It holds a lot more memories and a lot more possibilities. And how does it become a symbol of a poor intellect, a poor person? Now, I have these both the books of Harari, the Sapiens and the Homo Deus. And then these two books, he has been building up a possibility ahead for our future, a brilliant possibility.
Are you going to read it to us, or
No.
no?
I mean, there is a Harari is a international thinker. He has been producing books after books.
Yep.
And well accepted, and his arguments are correct, logical.
Yes, Vandana says, great point about the use of energy. Harari's triumphalist narrative seemed to ignore some of these aspects. It is fun to read Harari because it makes you feel better. It's all going to be okay. I hope he's right. And then let's see, Ken Solis has some thoughts here. I feel that Wang's points can all be restated and explained via thermodynamics, information theory, and complexity science, e.g. protons last seemingly forever because the forces holding its quarks together are not susceptible to noise like life. Also, stating that which survives longer is a higher level of existence is arbitrary. I would rather be able to have a higher level of information. Unfortunately, that means more ways to become disordered as illness, injury, or death. He goes on, thwarting entropy, extinction, pollution. Worry that Wang's theory does not provide pragmatic solutions, but mainly another articulation via philosophy with references to scientific discoveries. So I would consider Wang as a philosophical wrapping around the science. And like David Christian, and he did it in isolation, it was original work, and he simply sees it as in another direction. It's really a reciprocal. So I think that our pluralistic new value is that we have multiple voices, and he enriches it, because when I listen and I go through his book and I listen to his video, there are tiny little things that he says about the timeline, which we all know really well, but he articulates it in a different way. One of the things he said was that the dinosaurs were going extinct anyway, and I haven't heard that before. And I want to dig into that. But so we need these multi-voices, and that's why I was very excited to bring it to Big History this year. It's a fun journey, and it adds richness. And none of us really can be certain about anything. All we can do is pursue knowledge, as Arendt says. So, okay, so Paul says, yes, and Zora answered it. So sorry I have to leave. Okay, all right, so I think we're good. I think we've exhausted this. And unless anyone wants to raise a hand and jump in. All right, I think we had an extra long chat session. So maybe some of you need to go to the restroom, or they're just right down the corner, right around the corner. They're easy to get to. Thank you all for being here and listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
You.
Yeah.
Good night.
It's still late, 1:30 a.m. 1:20 a.m. Yeah.
Yes.